Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been working at the same dead-end office job for 3 years now, and honestly, it's been draining the life out of me. The cubicle walls feel like they're closing in more each day, and my boss treats us like we're robots instead of people. That's why when my two buddies suggested we go to this music festival, I jumped at the chance. I've been saving up for months, took time off work, and even bought the tickets the second they went on sale. This was going to be my escape from the monotony. The festival was everything I hoped it would be. The outdoor venue was packed with hundreds of people, all there for the same reason, to forget about their problems and just enjoy some good music. There was no assigned seating, which meant everyone was free to move around and get as close to the stage as they wanted. The energy was incredible from the moment we walked in. My friends and I had staked out a decent spot, about halfway back from the stage. We could see everything clearly, and the sound was perfect. The opening act was pretty good, but we were all really waiting for the main artist to come on. That's when I decided to be a good friend and go grab us some drinks. The bar line wasn't too bad, and I managed to get 3 drinks pretty quickly. I had a beer can for myself and 2 plastic cups with mixed drinks for my friends. Balancing everything was a bit tricky, but I'd done this before at other concerts. The beer can was secure in my right hand, and I carefully held both plastic cups in my left. As I started making my way back through the crowd, the main artist took the stage. The place absolutely erupted. Everyone started cheering and pushing forward, trying to get closer to the stage. The energy was exactly what I've been craving after months of office boredom. This was why I've been looking forward to this night for so long. Navigating through the excited crowd with drinks in both hands was challenging. People were bumping into each other left and right, everyone trying to move at once. I was being extra careful, not to spill anything, but with hundreds of people all pushing in the same direction, it was inevitable that someone would bump into me. That's exactly what happened. Someone knocked into my left side, and I felt some of the drink slosh out of the plastic cups. I looked down and saw that I'd spilled a bit on myself and on a girl standing nearby. I felt terrible about it immediately. I turned to her to apologize, but the music was so loud and everyone was cheering so enthusiastically that I couldn't hear anything she was saying. She was clearly upset, moving her mouth and gesturing, but the sound was completely drowned out by the crowd and the music. I shouted as loud as I could that I was sorry and that I didn't mean to spill on her, but I could barely hear my own voice over the noise. I could see she was still trying to say something to me, but it was useless. The music was too loud, and everyone around us was singing along and cheering. I figured the best thing to do was to continue on my way and let her enjoy the concert. It was an accident, I'd apologized as best I could, and standing there shouting at each other wasn't going to help anyone. So I turned away to keep walking back to where my friends were waiting. That's when I felt her grab my hand. Not just a tap on the shoulder to get my attention, but a full grab. Before I could react, she wrestled both plastic cups right out of my left hand. I was so shocked that I didn't even resist at first. I just stood there staring at her, trying to process what was happening. Then she threw both drinks on the ground. The liquid splashed everywhere, getting on both of us again and soaking several people around us. Now we were both even more wet than before, and she'd made a mess that affected everyone nearby. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. She had this satisfied grin on her face, like she'd just accomplished something great. I could barely make out what she was saying over the noise, but she was telling me how I liked it now. Her expression said everything. She was proud of what she'd just done. She thought she'd gotten some kind of revenge on me for an accident that had already affected both of us equally. That's when something snapped inside me. I've been dealing with entitled people at work for years. People who thought they could treat others badly just because they felt like it. I've been looking forward to this night for months, saving up money I didn't really have just to have a few hours where I could forget about all that nonsense. I looked at the beer can still in my right hand, then back at her smug face. She was still grinning, clearly expecting me to just walk away defeated. but I'd had enough of people like her. Without saying a word, I opened the beer can and poured the entire thing over her head. The cold liquid hit her hair and ran down her face, soaking her shirt completely. Her expression went from smug satisfaction to complete shock in about half a second. She stood there with her mouth open, dripping wet, looking like she couldn't believe what had just happened. I didn't wait around to see her reaction. I immediately turned around and started walking back toward the bar to get replacement drinks. Behind me, I could hear people yelling and asking what had just happened, but I kept walking. As I got further away from the scene, I realized that from everyone else's perspective, they'd only seen me pour a beer on some random girl. They hadn't seen her grab my drinks and throw them on the ground. They hadn't seen her satisfied grin when she thought she'd gotten one over on me. But I didn't care. For the first time in months, I felt like I'd stood up for myself against someone who thought they could walk all over other people. The rest of the night was amazing, and my friends and I had the time of our lives. Sometimes you have to stand up to entitled people, even if the crowd doesn't see the full story. I'm married to my husband for 5 years now, and things have been great between us. We're both in our early 30s, and while we're not rolling in money, we're doing okay financially. I work in marketing for a tech company, and I make about 3 times what my husband does. It's not because I'm some kind of genius, but because I was lucky enough to come from a family that could afford to send me to a good college, and I landed a decent job right out of school. My husband works in customer service, and he's really good at what he does, but the pay isn't amazing. Still, we make it work. We have our joint account for household expenses, and we both contribute what we can. My husband has always been a bit sensitive about the income difference, but we've worked through it over the years. My husband comes from a family where money has always been tight. His mom raised 3 kids mostly on her own after his dad left when they were young. She's always struggled financially, and my husband and his 2 siblings have all tried to help her out when they can. Among the 3 of them, my husband and I are definitely the most stable financially, which means we often end up being the ones she turns to when she needs help. Last Tuesday, I was just finishing up work when my phone rang. It was my mother-in-law, which was unusual because she usually calls my husband directly. She told me she really needed to talk to me about something important. When I asked what was going on, she explained that her rent was overdue and she was really struggling to pay it. She said she'd been stressed about it for weeks and didn't know what to do. She was hoping maybe I could help her out this time. I could hear the stress in her voice, and I felt bad for her. But I also knew that my husband and I had our own financial responsibilities to think about. I told her I was sorry to hear she was going through this and that I would talk to my husband about it that night. I promised to figure out what we could do to help and get back to her soon. She thanked me and said she really appreciated it. That evening I brought it up with my husband over dinner. He immediately looked worried and asked how much she needed. I explained that she didn't give me a specific amount, but she mentioned her rent was overdue. He told me her rent was usually around $800, which was a lot for us right now. I suggested maybe we could help with part of it, like covering half of it. We talked about it for a while, looking at our budget and our upcoming expenses. $400 would be tight, but we could manage it without putting ourselves in a bad spot. We agreed that helping with half the rent was the right thing to do. My husband called his mom right away. He told her we had talked about her rent situation and that we could help her with half of it from our joint account. There was a pause, and then I heard her voice get sharp. She asked why only 50% and said she was going to speak with me instead. Then she hung up on him. Just like that. My husband looked at me with this confused expression and told me she had hung up on him and wanted to talk to me. I found it weird since we had just agreed to help her with $400. About 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. It was her, and she was acting like the conversation with my husband had never happened. She asked me what she had told me concerning her rent, reminding me that I had said I would get back to her. I was confused because my husband had literally just talked to her. I told her that my husband had just told her that we would be giving her half of the rent from our joint account. Her whole tone changed immediately. It went from sweet and desperate to demanding and cold. She asked why just half, sounding annoyed. I explained that was what we were able to give right now, and that we had looked at our budget and that was what we could afford without putting ourselves in a difficult position. Then she said something that really shocked me. She told me that I was more rich than them and that if I were a good daughter-in-law, I would have given her the full amount. She insisted that I could afford it. I was honestly stunned. Here we were trying to help her out with a significant amount of money, and she was calling me a bad daughter-in-law because we couldn't give her everything she wanted. I suggested that maybe she could ask her other two children to help cover the rest. Her response was immediate and dismissive. She said no, they weren't rich, but I was rich. That's when I realized what was really happening. She didn't see this as us helping her out of kindness. She saw my money as something she was entitled to. In her mind, because I made more money, I owed it to her. I told her I was sorry, but $400 was what we could offer, and that was our final decision. She called it ridiculous and said I was being selfish. She asked how I could have so much money and just let my husband's mother struggle. I tried to explain that we weren't letting her struggle, that we were offering to help with half her rent, which was a substantial amount for us. She insisted it wasn't substantial for me, claiming I made more money than all of them combined. At that point, I'd had enough. I hung up on her. My husband was standing there looking mortified. He apologized and said he couldn't believe she had spoken to me like that. I told him I couldn't believe she had hung up on him and then called me, pretending like he hadn't just offered her help. We decided not to call her back that night. We figured she needed time to cool down and think about whether she really wanted to refuse our help over this. The next day, my husband tried calling her to smooth things over. He told her he thought there was a misunderstanding yesterday and that we wanted to help her, but we could only afford to give her half the rent money. She insisted there was no misunderstanding and said I was rich and being cheap. She claimed I could easily pay her whole rent and not even notice the money missing. My husband tried to explain that wasn't how our finances worked, that we had a budget and our own bills to pay. She accused him of choosing me over his own mother. Then she hung up on him again. At this point, I was getting angry. Not only was she being completely unreasonable, but she was trying to manipulate my husband and make him feel guilty for not forcing me to give her more money. I decided to call her myself. I told her I thought we needed to have a clear conversation about this. I explained that we had offered to help her with $400, which was a significant amount of money for us. I said she could either accept our help or find another solution, but we weren't going to be guilt-tripped into giving her more than we could afford. She called me selfish and greedy, saying that a good daughter-in-law would take care of her husband's family. I responded that a good mother-in-law would be grateful for the help she was offered instead of demanding more. She was outraged and asked how I dared to speak to her like that. I shot back, asking how she dared to call me selfish for offering to help her with her rent. Then I hung up on her again. My husband and I talked about it that night, and we decided we were done trying to reason with her. We would keep our offer open for 24 hours, and if she didn't want our help, that was her choice. She never called back. 2 weeks later, my husband's brother called him. He said their mom had been telling everyone that we had refused to help her with her rent and that she almost got evicted. My husband was shocked and told his brother that wasn't what happened at all. He explained that we had offered to pay half her rent and she had refused because she wanted the full amount. His brother was surprised and asked him to wait while he processed this information. Apparently, she had told them that we had said no completely. My husband explained the whole situation to his brother, who was shocked. It turned out that his mom had been telling everyone that we were heartless and had refused to help her at all. The brother ended up calling the other sibling, and they decided to split the rent between them. They were both pretty upset when they found out the truth. A month later, my mother-in-law called my husband to apologize. She said she was sorry for the misunderstanding and hoped we could move past it. My husband told her it wasn't a misunderstanding, that she had refused our help and then lied to the family about what happened. She tried to excuse herself, saying she was just stressed about the rent and didn't mean to cause problems. My husband wasn't buying it. He told her that she had called me selfish and greedy for offering to help her, and that wasn't stress That was entitlement. She tried to backtrack and make excuses, but my husband wasn't having it. He told her that if she ever needed help in the future, she could ask, but she needed to understand that we would decide what we could afford, not her. After all of this drama, she ended up getting help from her other two children anyway, so she could have just accepted our offer, gotten help from them for the other half, and avoided all of this mess. But I guess that would have required her to treat us with respect instead of acting like she was entitled to our money. Now, when she calls, she's much more polite. I think she realized that her attitude was going to cost her more than just money if she kept it up. I've been doing archery for about 15 years now. Started when I was 12 at a local youth program, and it became my escape from everything else going on at home. My parents were going through a messy divorce, and shooting arrows at a target was somehow therapeutic. I kept at it through high school, joined the college team, and now at 27, I compete in regional tournaments pretty regularly. This particular tournament was at our local community center. Nothing fancy, just a weekend competition with different age groups. I was in the adult division, and there was a youth division for kids under 16. The prize wasn't much, just some gift certificates to the local sporting goods store and cheap trophies, but people take these things seriously. I was having a decent day, hitting consistent shots and sitting in second place going into the final round. That's when I noticed Karen and her son at the youth range next to us. The kid looked maybe 13, skinny, with thick glasses, clearly nervous about the whole thing. He wasn't terrible, but he definitely wasn't winning material either. Karen was hovering over him like a helicopter, giving him constant advice and corrections. Every time he'd miss the center, she'd get more agitated. The kid was obviously stressed, and his shots were getting worse because of it. During the break between rounds, Karen approached the tournament director, who was also helping judge the youth division. She complained that there had been some kind of mistake with the scoring for her son. She insisted that he had been shooting better than what was recorded and claimed that some of his arrows that should have been 10s were marked as 9s. The director looked at his clipboard and then at her son's target, which was still up. He explained that they score based on where the arrows actually hit, and if they're touching the line, they give the lower score because that's standard practice. Karen argued that her son was just a child and had been practicing so hard for the competition. She pleaded for him to give her son a little leeway. The director apologized but said the rules were the same for everyone, and they couldn't make exceptions. That's when Karen started getting really worked up. Her voice got louder, and people were starting to stare. She declared that the whole thing was ridiculous and that her son deserved to win because he had been working harder than any of the other kids. I was standing nearby getting my arrows ready for the final round, when I couldn't help but laugh a little. Not loudly, but apparently loud enough for her to hear. Karen asked me if I thought something was funny. I apologized and said it was just that everyone here had been practicing hard, and that was kind of the point of a competition. She snapped at me, asking who had asked for my opinion and telling me this didn't concern me. I agreed that it didn't, but pointed out that asking the judge to let her kid win wasn't how competitions worked. Karen insisted she wasn't asking them to let him win but was asking for fair scoring. I sarcastically agreed, saying she wanted fair scoring where her kid gets points he didn't earn. That's when her face turned red, and she marched back over to her son. I figured that was the end of it, and went back to preparing for my final round. But Karen wasn't done. She started whispering urgently to her son, pointing in my direction. The kid looked confused and kept shaking his head, but she kept pushing. Finally, she grabbed his bow and started trying to hand it to him. She ordered him to aim the bow at me, telling him to just do it. Her son refused, saying he wasn't going to shoot someone. Karen called him a baby and told him to just scare me a little. The kid was clearly uncomfortable and kept refusing. Other parents were starting to notice the commotion. That's when Karen completely lost it. She reached into her son's quiver, grabbed an arrow, and started walking toward me with it raised like a weapon. She yelled that I thought I was so smart and asked how funny I thought this was. I backed away quickly, but she kept advancing. The tournament director saw what was happening and started shouting for security. The director called for security, saying they needed help immediately. Karen screamed that I was a jerk who thought he could make fun of her son, and she was going to show me. She actually swung the arrow at me like a club. I dodged it, but she was close enough that I could feel the wind from it. That's when the security guards finally reached us. The security guard ordered her to drop the weapon immediately. Karen protested that it wasn't a weapon, just an arrow. The guard told her she was threatening someone with a sharp object and demanded she put it down. Karen reluctantly dropped the arrow, but she was still screaming about how unfair everything was and how I had provoked her. The security guards detained her while the tournament director called the police. Karen claimed this was assault and that I had been threatening her son. I calmly explained that I had never even spoken to her son and was just commenting on her asking the judge to cheat. Karen accused me of bullying her son and making fun of him. The whole thing was caught on someone's phone and the tournament director had witnessed everything. When the police arrived, they took statements from multiple people who had seen the whole incident. Her son was crying and apologizing to everyone. The poor kid was humiliated and kept saying he never wanted to hurt anyone. Some of the other parents took him aside and made sure he was okay while his mom was being arrested. Karen insisted the whole situation was ridiculous and claimed she was just defending her child. The police officer explained that threatening someone with a weapon was not defending her child and told her she was under arrest for assault with a deadly weapon. Karen protested that it wasn't deadly because it was just an arrow. The officer read her rights and suggested she use her right to remain silent. As they led her away in handcuffs, she was still shouting about how unfair the whole situation was and how she was going to sue everyone involved. The tournament director had to calm everyone down and explain that the competition would continue as planned. I ended up winning my division, but honestly, the whole thing left a bad taste in my mouth. The kid never got to finish his competition, and I felt terrible for him. He had to leave with his dad, who showed up looking embarrassed and apologetic. The father apologized profusely for his wife's behavior, saying she gets carried away sometimes. I told him not to worry about it, and that his son seemed like a good kid. He agreed that his son was good and didn't deserve what had happened. I heard later that Karen was charged with assault and banned from all future tournaments at the community center. Her son apparently switched to a different club across town where he could compete without the drama. From what I heard, he actually started doing better once the pressure was off. Back in 2015, I was working as a senior analyst at one of those massive corporations where office politics ruled everything. You know the type, where getting promoted had less to do with your actual work and more to do with who liked you in the management circle. I've been there for 3 years, consistently hitting my targets and leading successful projects. My department head had been pushing for my promotion to team lead for months. The promotion process at this company was ridiculous. They gather all the middle managers from different departments in our division into one room with the division head, and each candidate would be discussed live. It was like a weird corporate gladiator arena where managers would argue for or against promotions based on their own agendas. I remember the day of the meeting clearly. I wasn't allowed in the room, obviously, but I was nervous as hell sitting at my desk, refreshing my email every 5 minutes hoping for good news. When my department head came back, his face told me everything I needed to know before he even spoke. He apologized and told me the promotion didn't go through this time. When I asked what happened, he explained that someone from the customer service department had stood up and argued against it. I was confused since I'd never worked with anyone from customer service. Our departments barely interacted except for the occasional cross-functional meeting. I asked who it was and why they would even have an opinion about my work. He told me it was their manager Karen who had made some claims about my performance that were completely false. She said I was difficult to work with and had attitude problems. I was stunned since I'd maybe spoken to this woman twice in 3 years, and both times were brief interactions in the break room. I told him how insane that was, since I'd never even worked on a project with her department. He said he knew that and had tried to defend me, but she was very convincing and had the division head's ear for some reason. Later that day, I grabbed coffee with two of my friends who were also managers and had been in the meeting. They filled me in on what really happened. One friend explained that it was obvious what Karen was doing. She was still mad about her own promotion getting shot down last month. My other friend added that my department head had argued against promoting her assistant to supervisor level, saying the person wasn't ready. Karen had taken it personally. The first friend continued telling me that when my name came up, Karen stood up and just started making stuff up. She said I was uncooperative and had poor communication skills. The second friend confirmed it was clearly revenge, and everyone in the room could see it. But once she planted those seeds of doubt, the division head got nervous about approving it. I was furious. This woman had sabotaged my career advancement over some petty departmental politics that had nothing to do with me. She had lied about my performance to get back at my department head, and I was just collateral damage. The whole experience left such a bad taste in my mouth that I started looking for other jobs immediately. 6 months later, they finally offered me the promotion, but by then I'd already accepted a position at a smaller company with better growth potential. I gave my 2 weeks notice and left. Fast forward 4 years. I'm now a department head at this smaller tech company, and we've been growing steadily. We decided to create a new position for head of customer experience, which would oversee customer service, support, and client relations. It was a senior role with significant responsibility and equity compensation. I was reviewing the candidate pool with our human resources director when she mentioned something that made my blood run cold. She told me about a really strong candidate for the customer experience role who had extensive experience at large corporations and currently managed the customer service team. I asked about her background, and the HR director explained that she worked at the same company I did a few years ago during the same time period. She asked if I knew her. When she showed me the resume, I couldn't believe it. It was Karen, the same woman who had torpedoed my promotion 4 years earlier. The HR director asked if I had any insights about her work style or performance since we'd worked at the same company. This was it. My chance for payback. I could have been professional about it, maybe given a neutral response. But remembering how she'd lied about me and cost me months of career advancement, I decided she deserved the same treatment. I told her that I actually remembered Karen well and that she was not a good fit for leadership roles. I explained that she had issues with honesty and transparency, was very political, and would manipulate situations to her advantage. The HR director seemed surprised since Karen's references were quite positive. I explained that references can be managed, but I had worked there for 3 years and saw how she operated. I described her as a type to throw people under the bus to protect herself or get ahead, and said I wouldn't recommend her for a senior position here. When the HR director asked if I'd be comfortable working with her, I was honest and said I thought hiring her would be a mistake since she wasn't the kind of person who fits our company culture. The HR director took notes and thanked me for the feedback. 2 days later, I heard that they'd canceled Karen's interview. The HR director later told me they'd decided to go with an internal candidate instead and thanked me for the honest feedback about that external applicant. I felt a surge of satisfaction. Karen had cost me a promotion through lies and manipulation. Now I'd return the favor by being honest about her character and work style. But the real satisfaction came 3 years later. The tech industry had been booming, and our small company had developed some innovative solutions that caught the attention of a major corporation. They made an acquisition offer that was too good to refuse. The buyout price was nearly 10 times what our stock had been worth when Karen had applied for that position. Since all employees received stock options as part of their compensation package, everyone who worked there during the acquisition made a significant windfall. The head of customer experience position that Karen had been denied would have come with substantial equity. When I calculated what she would have earned from the stock options alone, it was life-changing money, enough to pay off a mortgage, fund kids' college educations, or retire early. Instead, she was probably still grinding away at some corporate job dealing with the same political nonsense that had made her so bitter in the first place. She never even knew why she didn't get the interview. As far as she knew, we just decided to promote someone internally. She had no idea that her past actions had come back to haunt her in such a spectacular way. I'm not usually one to hold grudges, but there was something deeply satisfying about seeing karma work its magic. She'd played dirty corporate politics and cost me months of career advancement through lies and manipulation. Years later, that same behavior cost her what would have been the financial opportunity of a lifetime. The tech industry is smaller than people think, and people remember how you treat them. I work at a tech startup for the past 2 years, and honestly, it's been draining. 60-hour weeks, constant deadlines, and barely any time to breathe. My friends and I have been talking about needing a real break for months. We're all in our mid-20s, all grinding away at our careers, and we desperately needed to get out of the city. When I found this perfect cabin on Airbnb about 3 hours north, I jumped on it. Nothing too fancy, just a cozy 3-bedroom place with a fireplace and a decent kitchen. Split between 5 of us, it was totally affordable. I put it on my credit card and everyone agreed to Venmo me their share. My friend has always been the type to involve her family in everything. Don't get me wrong, I like her mom well enough, but she's always been a bit intense. She works as a manager at some retail chain and constantly complains about how hard her job is and how much stress she's under. Fair enough, retail management sounds awful, but she tends to make everything about herself. 2 weeks before the trip, my friend called me with a weird request. She said her mom had heard about our cabin trip and was having a really rough time at work lately. She asked if maybe her mom could come along because she really needed a break. I wasn't thrilled about the idea. This was supposed to be our friend group's escape, not a family vacation, but the cabin was big enough, and I didn't want to be the bad guy. I told her I guess it would be okay if her mom was cool with us just hanging out and doing our own thing. My friend assured me that her mom would absolutely be fine with that. She said her mom just wanted to relax and read her book and wouldn't bother us at all. Famous last words, right? The day before we were supposed to leave, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but when I answered, I heard her mom's voice. She introduced herself and said she needed to talk to me about this weekend. I asked what was up and she dropped a bomb on me. She said she'd been thinking and she really thought it would be better if her boyfriend and she just took the cabin this weekend instead. I literally had to pause and make sure I heard her correctly. I asked her to repeat what she'd said. She explained that she knew we kids were disappointed, but I had to understand that she'd been under an incredible amount of stress lately. Her job was so demanding and she really needed this break. She said young people can travel anytime and don't have the same responsibilities she does. I felt my blood pressure rising. This woman was seriously trying to steal our vacation. I told her I didn't think she understood. I had booked this cabin, I had paid for it, and my friends and I had been planning this for weeks. She said she just thought I was being a little selfish. She kept insisting that she was older, had been working longer, and needed this more than I did. She asked if I couldn't just be flexible. I told her no, I couldn't be flexible about my own vacation that I paid for. She said this was just so disappointing. She said she really thought I'd be more respectful to someone older, and that young people today just don't understand what it means to be considerate. She was actually trying to guilt-trip me into giving up a vacation I had organized and paid for. I told her I was being perfectly respectful, and what she was asking was completely unreasonable. She disagreed and said she didn't think it was unreasonable at all. She called it a very fair request and suggested I could easily book something else for next weekend. I explained that actually, no, I couldn't. This was the weekend we all took off work. This was the weekend we planned for. And this was the reservation I made and paid for. She told me she hoped I could live with myself, knowing I prevented a stressed-out woman from getting the break she desperately needed. She said she was sure my parents raised me better than this. I shot back that my parents raised me not to try to take other people's vacations. She said fine, but warned me not to expect her to forget this. She also said not to expect her daughter to be happy about how I treated her mother. Then she hung up on me. I sat there staring at my phone, wondering if I was losing my mind. Did this woman seriously just try to commandeer our entire trip? I immediately called my friend to tell her what had happened. She was mortified and kept apologizing, saying her mom had completely overstepped, but I could tell she was caught in the middle and felt awful. The next day we went on our trip. It was exactly what we needed. We hiked, played board games, cooked together, and just enjoyed being away from the city. But there was definitely a weird tension because my friend kept getting texts from her mom throughout the weekend. When we got back, my friend started acting strange. She was short with me, barely responding to group texts, and generally seemed uncomfortable whenever we hung out. Finally, I asked her what was wrong. She said she just thought I could have handled things better with her mom. I asked her what she meant by handled better, pointing out that her mom had tried to take our vacation. She said her mom was just stressed and asking for help, and that I had embarrassed her. I asked how I had embarrassed her when she was the one who called me and demanded I give up a trip I paid for. My friend said I could have been nicer about it. I realized then that no matter how I had handled it, I was going to be the bad guy in this situation. Her mom had put her in an impossible position, and instead of being angry at her mom for the ridiculous request, she was taking it out on me. But here's the thing. I wasn't about to apologize for not giving away my own vacation. The whole situation was insane from the start. What kind of person thinks they can just call up someone they barely know and demand they hand over a paid reservation? A few weeks later, I found out through another friend that Karen had been telling people at her work that I had stolen her vacation and that young people today have no respect for their elders. She was literally playing the victim in a situation where she had tried to hijack someone else's trip. My friend and I eventually worked things out, but it took months. She finally admitted that her mom had been completely out of line but said she felt caught between us. I get that, but I also think there are some battles where you have to pick the right side. I still can't believe someone actually tried to steal my vacation and then got mad when I wouldn't let them. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.